makes our days good or bad, really ends up being other people. So if those are those relationships is some of the best places to start.
That was Katie Carlson. She is the Director of Wellness Initiatives for Marion County Sheriff's Office in Indianapolis, where she oversees agency-wide wellness programming, peer support, and resilience training for about 1,000 deputies and staff. She teaches nervous system regulation, mindfulness, yoga, and stress and recovery skills at both the Marion County as well as the Indiana Law Enforcement Training Academies. And she was recognized by the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation, ICISF, as the 2023 Emerging Leader in Crisis Intervention. During today's conversation, we spanned a wide range of topics on wellness and running a program and that sort of thing. And it started off with a quick exploration of her origin into this space and what drew her into it, because she started off as a PIO and then eventually became passionate about running this program. And there's a lot more to it than that. I'll let her explain it, but a really cool story there. And then as we kind of pulled the thread on how she does what she does, we talked a lot about some of the skills she teaches, and maybe it's because of the tactile nervous system training webinar series we're doing or whatever. I've become particularly interested in this concept of interoception, right? Like reading our own body's signals as well as emotional literacy. And both of those things were things that she teaches and is passionate about. So a great conversation we had there. And then we end with what's actually working in wellness. I think anybody watching this knows that wellness has become a buzzword, right? And it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and everybody wants to sell something to your department. What's working? She talks about some of the cost-efficient ways of getting after that and how to build a program from the inside out. Obviously, giving respect to the fact that there are great external organizations. She calls it ICISF, FOP, and others that are great at helping set up programs, but really gets after who owns it in the agency. All right, so that's enough from me. Let's get to the interview we had a chance to do today. Sound about right? Dude, you rock. So, I'm super excited about this. This interview has been one that I've wanted to do for a while. When I met you at the conference 2 years ago, and unfortunately you missed this last year.
Yeah.
But you've had quite a journey into the space you're in. And so just kind of give us a little bit of background, because you didn't start off in wellness. So tell us a little bit about your journey to get to where you're at today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, by the way. I'm really excited to be on the podcast. So my journey at the sheriff's office actually started in 2012. Actually, prior to that, I had about 8 years of experience working in local government, local and state government, and politics of all things. But when I started at the sheriff's office, I was the public information officer. So for 8.5 years, I managed all of the media relations and all of the social media for every division of the Marion County Sheriff's Office. And that really gave me an amazing behind the scenes look at across the board in an entire agency, and one that I think is a unique perspective, especially in that a lot of people who are actual law enforcement officers start in one area and kind of work their way up, or maybe they transfer to a couple. And really, whether it's been between PIO or wellness, I have always interacted with every nook and cranny of the Marion County Sheriff's Office. And so it's just been really helpful to kind of understand how the agency works as a whole. So I loved doing that job. I never really had very much experience knowing or working with law enforcement or public safety personnel before starting at the sheriff's office. And I immediately fell in love with the people that did this job. They were just some of the kindest, most, compassionate people that I had ever known. And that's still true today. And so, I loved them. I loved the opportunity to be able to kind of tell their story and to show them in the best light to the media and on social media and to the public. And, I was looking around and seeing all of these amazing things they were doing. And I just loved the opportunity to tell that story. And really that sense or that line of storytelling has a lot to do with what I do now in the field of wellness. So the way that transition kind of happened was accidental. And I'll mention that I came into the sheriff's office with a lot of trauma from my teenage years and also from my early career. And then when you add on top of that being the sole contact for 10 different media organizations, I went about the first 5 years of working at the sheriff's office without taking a vacation. I really didn't have any coverage. I never knew when my phone was going to blow up. I never knew when something bad was going to happen. And despite just really loving all of the people that I worked with, I went from living in the yellow or green, just thinking everything's okay, with all of a sudden every bad thing that was happening in the city and the state and really across the country was suddenly in my inbox. And I was rattled. I mean, basically without good time off, without really having those boundaries or the support that I needed to be able to fully rest, without really taking my weekends off. So I had that trauma. I had this kind of burnout that was sort of settling in on top of that trauma. I wasn't managing it in a way that was healthy. And eventually I started on my own journey with trauma, which involved finding a therapist, stopping drinking for the first time, and going to and starting in yoga teacher training. And as I started in yoga teacher training, main thing I wanted to do, yoga had long been this one area of practice for me that was kind of like, it felt like a relief from kind of everything else in my life. And I didn't really understand the why behind that. Now I do. And it's one of the things I just love to share with people. But I knew that I wanted to share my yoga practice with law enforcement personnel. I had taken friends in law enforcement with me to yoga classes before. And so my intention as a yoga teacher was to really teach and to teach law enforcement. And I was able to start doing that actually before moving into this wellness role. I started teaching law enforcement in 2020. So as the PIO, I got a notification across my desk one day, and it said that we had received a Law Enforcement Mental Health and Wellness Act grant. And this grant had something in it about peer support. And, you have to keep in mind that most of the things that came through my desk had to do with someone, getting hurt, someone dying, someone. So when I'm hearing like these really nice things, it's a huge contrast to what I was used to, landing in my email. Usually I was managing, all the bad things. So it said something about peer support. I didn't know what that was. I thought it sounded good. It said something about mindfulness. I had an idea about what that was, but I didn't really know. And I was just so curious about it, since I was already teaching yoga, that I asked who was going to be implementing this grant. And I was told, we don't know. The person who was pushing for the grant had been promoted and moved to another division of the sheriff's office. And so I volunteered. I was still PIO. And that was always nonstop, a busy job, man, especially through 2020. That was brutal for, having a large jail. So I was still PIO. I volunteered to implement this grant. And I was also really involved in recruitment. So I was overseeing all external communications for recruitment, including billboards, digital marketing, mail. So I really kind of had 3 full-time jobs there for a little while, and really completely ran out of gas by that next spring. But in the course of learning more about peer support and becoming involved in the Law Enforcement Mental Health and Wellness Act grantee community, and starting to make more connections across the country, as I learned about trauma and law enforcement and about wellness, it really reflected so much of the journey that I had personally been on. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And, everywhere I looked here, I'd, been managing media for every bad thing that had happened at the sheriff's office for 8.5 years, understanding that there are people that are involved, people that have been involved in every single one of those incidents. And, when you see people change, you see people change over time. And I just realized, we have so much work to do in this area. And so in addition to pretty much completely burning out myself with those 3 jobs, I asked our sheriff, Carrie Forrestal, if I could switch to focus, drop my PIO responsibilities and switch to focus on wellness. And I thought I might have to put up a fight or argue him. And he just basically said yes. And so it's been that way ever since. And what I really like to kind of compare it to now is that I used to tell the story of what the sheriff's office was doing and kind of, tell the outside version. And now I really talk a lot about the inside version, what this job does to law enforcement personnel, to public safety personnel, and what can we do about it, because it does have an impact both on individuals, on their families, and on their communities, and on agencies as a whole. So it's just such a enormous both responsibility and just a blessing to be able to do this work. It's hard to talk to me for very long without knowing how much I love the work and love my job.
This is so cool. And, it starts us off really well, because there are three things I kind of want to cover with you during this interview. One is you've got a very authentic approach. And as I follow you on LinkedIn, there's an approach you use. Like you said, you tell the story from the inside. I appreciate you saying that. The other thing I really want to dive into with you is your practice in how you do it, because I think you've got kind of a unique perspective as, the way you came up through the ranks as a PIO and worked your way into the wellness program, a unique perspective there. But just kind of following along, I really want to learn more about the way you do it, and then ultimately the bigger picture of wellness. So as we kind of pull the thread on that, let me jump back here and ask, so your process into the wellness space, you started off, you were already in the yoga space, kind of getting certified as a teacher there. You've also kind of advanced your education in a lot of other ways to better prepare you for the job. So talk to me a little bit about the education that you have and what's ideal, or I don't know if I said that right, so correct me if I'm wrong, but where should we be looking if we are interested in being a wellness director or a good wellness coordinator education-wise?
Yeah. Well, what I don't have is any kind of degree in mental health or as a therapist or anything like that. And I think sometimes that's actually to my own benefit. One, for just having had all of that experience already in the law enforcement world and not necessarily trying to fit in, from the outside. I am trained in 3 different areas, trained to teach. One of those is yoga. The second one is mindfulness. And the third one is critical incident stress management. And I'm an approved instructor through the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. So those are the 3 main qualifications that I have. And then a lot of the other stuff has been even as PIO, just learning how to kind of be an administrator in a large government agency takes a lot of, and they don't necessarily teach that in school. It takes a lot of work to know how. And I've had mentors that really showed me how to just get things done in law enforcement. So some of this stuff are things that I picked up along the way. Those are my 3 certifications for being able to teach other people officially. And that can vary. There are people who have, really legitimate certifications in, physical fitness and wellness. And I kind of envy those people, or in nutrition. And those are really valuable areas for a wellness program too. So whether it's a, mental health certification, physical fitness certification, but, looking for those that real ability to, take something and be able to really teach it to other people on a long-term basis. And of course, it's about going deep and not just this sort of surface level. Teaching critical incident stress management wouldn't really mean very much if I didn't have a ton of experience providing peer support. And so it's all of that real life experience providing peer support within a sheriff's office that makes me a better teacher for critical incident stress management, and a kind of a combination of all of those things that I end up teaching at the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy.
And you're networked in with other providers, and you've got a solid network in that way. And I think that is ultimately the part of the conversation I was hoping we'd have, is that sometimes, and I liken it to this series of universal joints, where on the outer edge are the researchers and the academics who empower the rest of us with knowledge. And sometimes that knowledge is very research-based and evidence-based in our profession, and we can immediately translate it. Other times it is research-informed, and we can't immediately translate it to law enforcement, but it works in athletics, it works in other adult populations, so maybe it'll work for us. And then on that next layer, you have the peer support folks who are highly qualified, certified in the ways that you are, networked to the outer edge there. and have a taste, a sense for the culture of the organization. And you, with the PIO background, you almost fall even into the next layer, which I talk about as like the folks on the DT mat are the right ones to be talking about mindfulness quite often, and to kind of translate that. You have, I think, a little bit of both of those, the middle and the outer layer, where you spent time in both. And so sometimes there is this big push to say, well, we need all this education and research. I think sometimes it is truly about spending time on the ground, as you just illuminated.
Yeah. And curiosity, I mean, if you're not like, no matter where you are with your degree, if you're not, whatever degrees, whatever training you have, if you're not, chasing some rabbit hole, like, and going down and really curious and really interested about how this can apply and make a difference in people's real lives, and sort of constantly chasing the things that aren't really known yet. I mean, we don't have to wait on research to see what really works well for other people too. But that curiosity is so important, both as a teacher and to really advance this or any field.
How much does curiosity drive your practice?
Oh man, a lot. And this kind of goes back into that first question that you were talking about with my writing. If I can kind of pull that
please.
Back into there. Yeah. So, I think that if there's one thing that I never try to write in a way that's like, oh, we have really limited resources, really limited financial resources at the sheriff's office. Like, if I had a dream wellness program, it's not necessarily what we would have here. I'm doing everything I can with what I have. But I think if there's anything that sort of makes my approach unique, it's that I just don't really shut up about it. And that has a lot to do with being a PIO and kind of taking this sort of PIO and communication lens. So while I'm not saying we're the best, this is the model program, everybody should do this, I do know that there are countless agencies and countless individuals who are, behind me on the path. And I'm just constantly trying to communicate and make information available and accessible in a way that can help people have an idea of where to start. But what I think probably is one of the biggest factors for a unique voice and curiosity is, and I'm just lucky, I kind of come by it naturally. My dad actually was a 40-year columnist for our humor columnist for our local newspaper in Muncie. And so, I grew up, I joke that I have like a high, tolerance to kind of exposure and embarrassment, because my dad used to write about our family in the Sunday newspaper all the time. And people would be asking me at church about stuff. I had no idea what they were talking about because I hadn't read his column that day. And, 40 years of that. And he also did a lot of feature writing. And so he wrote a lot about other people. And so when it comes to curiosity and just curiosity about people, which I think it's both the subject, but almost anything that I really care about is in terms of other people. And I want to know more about them. And I want to know if he makes people tick and, help people. I want people to feel seen when they're around me. And that involves asking a lot of questions. One of the other things that I think has been really helpful for that, actually, while there's not, there are a lot of things from my career in politics I wish I could undo. One of the things that I'm really grateful for is that I've knocked on about 15,000 doors and stood and had conversations with people just from all, walks of life. And so that sense of curiosity and knowing that each person is an individual and that there's something, that there are things that everybody cares about, like, having a sense of safety, wanting to be able to provide for your family, that are very common. And then there are things that make all of us, no matter how much you have in common, that make us different. And I'm interested in those things too. So I definitely inherited that sense of curiosity. Luckily, also, I think a sense of humor, which can be helpful. One, when talking, I joke that the biggest difference between my dad's writing and mine is that he was a humor writer and I write about trauma. But being able to talk about hard issues, especially sometimes uncomfortable issues when we're talking about suicide prevention, and there are a lot of uncomfortable issues when it comes to law enforcement wellness. And I think when you're able to talk about those with a sense of humor and a sense of curiosity, that it just kind of helps to open up minds and hopefully make people feel less attacked as individuals, but kind of, just curious about patterns that exist across, humans throughout civilian and law enforcement life, in different areas of the law enforcement, of the country within your agency. So it's curiosity is an important factor.
Super cool. And so I've actually got two questions for you, and I don't know what order to put them in, but I'm going to go with this one first. Recently, you wrote a LinkedIn post on, and it was largely about that experience of teaching suicide prevention or the realities of suicide in the profession, and how it is such an emotional topic. And you talked about trauma-informed essentially being an invitation. And what I think often happens, and I love working from a trauma-informed position, but what often happens when people hear the term trauma-informed, it becomes this touchy-feely, well, I would like to invite you to sit with me. But the reality is it's different than that, even though you refer to it as an invitation. And you kind of scratched it there just a little bit as you were unveiling that, I think, anyway, it's, if I'm not mistaken. So talk to me a little bit as we start moving into your practice and your approach to doing this. What does trauma-informed mean to you, and how do you do it? How do you come from that perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, at the root of trauma, a lot of the time, for the most part, has been things that we didn't choose. And so really anytime that we're able to, whether I have a couple rules too. One of them is that I try not to treat anything like it is too advanced or too spiritual or too anything for the law enforcement population, because in my experience, it's just not true. That people are open and willing to a lot of different terms, and that I just don't want to make it. I don't want to paint everybody with a wide brush. And so I think one of the things about invitation is it's kind of like setting something out on a tray and allowing somebody to pick something that you want, and it's just not forcing essentially anything on anybody. And so with that post, and that post got a lot of a lot of traction, or I think it struck a nerve with a lot of people, because I gave the cadets options. I gave them 3 options, and I basically said, if you start noticing discomfort, because I've taught this class for so long and I've taught it to so many hundreds of people that it's all based in a lot of experience, and having seen a lot of people sometimes have to leave or start to cry, and all of those things are very, very normal responses, and I want to sometimes. I mean, I've managed a lot of have been involved in a lot of line of duty deaths and officer suicide, not to mention kind of my own experiences with trauma. So what I told the group was, these are difficult subjects. And, if you start to notice, if you start to experience, difficult feelings about it, I want you to do one of 3 things. And we always teach breath work in that class. And we'll talk about nervous system in a little bit. Breath work's kind of the lowest hanging fruit there. And so it's like, take a few breaths first, and just kind of make sure that we're reminding our nervous system that we're safe. 2, remember that talking about these hard things is what can help prevent suicide and prevent isolation after a critical incident. One of the things that sort of, drives me crazy about this whole field in the first place is that the things that have happened are something that almost every officer goes through. So it's like, why are we acting like they're not normal, or why are we making people have to relearn this by themselves for the first time, over and over and over again, when it's something that everybody essentially experiences. So, just reminding ourselves that talking about this is a form of prevention. And then 3rd, I gave them the opportunity to leave the classroom. If it's, and just knowing that that I don't know, especially if you're teaching 150 people at the same time, I don't know what childhood experiences they had, what background experiences they had. So it could really bring up a lot for people. So just kind of leaving that door open and just saying, this is a choice, to stay. You have a choice whether or not to stay in this conversation. And it really, I think, helped a lot. And I think that really kind of paints one of the things I like to say about trauma-informed anything is that, a trauma-informed approach benefits everybody. So, who doesn't, even if you don't have trauma and someone, sticks a chocolate cake donut in your face and tells you to eat it, and what you really want is a glazed,
Right.
Something else, like it's always better. So presenting choice and giving people opportunity, and we talk so much about buy-in when it comes to law enforcement. So how are people supposed to buy in when you don't give them a choice or something to buy into? And so it's not it's not very soft. It's just a smart, really, approach to presenting hard things and allowing people to kind of lean into it on their own accord and with tools.
Yes, and Michael Cantrell is pretty prolific in the correction space, the prison officer podcast, and that sort of thing. He wrote a book recently called Smart Not Soft, right? And talking specifically about that. And as you kind of mentioned that, I think the whole thing and what I was inspired by in that was really about the choice. And there's this concept that is a management concept less than mental health, even though this all started in mental health, is that trauma informed is a reality. And what made me want to ask you the question was when you said I've knocked on 1,500, 15,000, whatever it is, number of doors. It was a really high number of doors, and had real conversations with people about what's really important to them. And the reality is, when we role model, whether it's from a management leadership perspective, whether it is from a program director perspective, which is management leadership administration as well, the role modeling of trauma-informed service, not just treatment, service, is an example. And it's an example they can carry with them on the road when they knock on that next door. Know that on the other side of that door is trauma we don't have a full appreciation of, and choice matters. And sometimes in this profession, as well as anybody, not everybody gets a choice. And so sometimes we've got to, exercise authority. But the reality is quite often there is some choice. And when we approach it, so I think role modeling is super cool. And I really appreciated the way you posted that and how you have that conversation. And that could be a whole other episode. But I do kind of want to talk now about that thing you mentioned. They're sitting in this classroom. You're talking about these hard topics, and whether that is childhood trauma, which inevitably comes up in a lot of these conversations, the realities of relationships and parents and all that kind of stuff that comes up in these conversations, and the realities of the job, right? And, there's so much stats out there on what the average police officer is going to see in the course of their career that it's no mystery. At some point, we are going to experience trauma. You kind of scratch the surface of interoception. I noticed something in myself. When did you begin teaching that in your approach to how you work? How important is it? How often do you talk about it? What we notice inside of us, and how do we awareness and regulate that?
Well, and that has a lot to do with trauma also, because, when that sense of choice, when our agency is taken away, when it feels like our bodies don't belong to us anymore, that's when we can sometimes lose touch with with our own inner sensations. And if there is one thing that probably blocks, interoception more than anything else, it's alcohol, which has been so prevalent in law enforcement culture for a long time. And I never mind. I say I'm happy to be the no fun club when it comes to that, but it comes in real experience where essentially I numbed out myself for the middle. I mean, I'm 43 now, but for the middle 20 years of my life, 20 years of my life. And so, I have a certain amount of regret from that. I also know that numbing at times, probably saved me from harsher realities. But, when it comes to really being able to, but we never end up moving. I don't want to say never. Again, I don't like to ever paint with a wide brush, but we have to feel what we feel to be able to move past it. And, I was talking to someone who I really respect a while ago, talking about something hard, and they said, I just shove it all down and it just stays right there. And unfortunately, that's just, it's not true. Maybe it's true that someone's not as affected by some aspects, some of the things that happen. And, if I'm doing a debriefing for an event, a critical incident, I'll tell people that, like, this critical incident, it didn't happen, it didn't happen in isolation. It happens in relationship to every other critical incident that you've had. It happens in relationship to what's happening in your personal life. Are you going through a divorce right now? Are you, it happens in relationship to things that happen to them. So the reason why that interoception is so important is because it's kind of an antidote to the numbness of both alcohol and both shutting down, and of this sort of almost a fear of like what we might find when we look inside of ourselves. And that fear can even be on a physical level, because, if we, and it comes down to, it's as simple as someone noticing that there's something that's wrong in their knee, and noticing that there's something that's wrong in their knee, but they don't do anything about it. 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 And then they need surgery, or and the same thing can happen, in your stomach. It can happen at any part of our body. So our bodies are sending us these messages. We need to have some level of clarity to be able to listen to it. If we drown out all of our bad feelings, all of our bad thoughts, all of the time, it's going to just be that much harder, and there's going to be that much buildup, and the kind of smack in the face is going to be that much less pleasant. And trust me, I've been there when you go through it. So it's about kind of an appreciation. That interoception is really a sort of appreciation of being alive and having these bodies that are, where our heart is beating and our stomach's digesting food and our brains, and that they're constantly sending us messages, and just taking a different perspective in that, my body is protecting me and I need to listen to it.
I love that. So interoception, we've talked about it in kind of broad terms, why it's important, but kind of, if you would, just kind of open it up. And what is interoception? What does it mean? How does it work? That sort of thing.
Yeah, it's really just noticing the kind of inner landscape of your body. And so if you notice that you have to use the bathroom, that sensation, that feeling of needing to use the bathroom is interoception. If you notice that you're hungry, or that you're full, or that your stomach hurts from whatever it is, and there's another area, it's like you go and you eat some really bad meal and your stomach is not reacting to it, but you ignore it and do the same thing the next day. Like, what do you think's going to happen? We've got to listen to those. So it's listening to that. It's listening. And part of what's important, I think, about interoception is understanding how interoception works, or how our body works with our nervous system, and with fight and flight, and with rest and digest. And so we can start to recognize some of the signs and the signals that our body is sending us. I think it's both trauma informed, and we'll just say smart to do it without judgment. Like that this isn't, we don't have to necessarily label everything good or bad, that this just is. And I think that it's so just kind of it's just that noticing just inside of ourselves. And so and it could even be that a pit in your stomach when you're nervous for a conversation, and maybe it's because that's conversation that's really overdue, or or there's something that you did and you regret, and you can feel it really inside of your body, or your heart feels heavy after the loss of a colleague, any of those things. So it's really a sense of internal awareness and listening. Does that
100%? And I really appreciate how you laid that out, because the reality is, we don't have an owner's manual that comes with us. And even if we did, and I think you've even talked about this before, we don't, even if we did, it rewrites itself with every experience. And so the reality is, I think there's got to be time to experience it, to train with it, to know what it is, under some sort of guidance and mentorship with a person like yourself, a yoga instructor, or mindfulness instructor, or somebody who is informed on it, and to spend some time with it when it is a lower risk. Because the reality is, when you're run into a call that has your heart racing, or your mind starts moving in a different direction, that is an interoceptive sign. But the same is true, as you just said, sitting outside a doctor's office waiting for news. What's happening in my body right now? Why am I clenching my teeth? I'm not nervous about this, but something's happening here, right? So kind of talk to me a little bit about when the right time to train is, how important is it to stay in a practice, that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, after the last time I delivered one of these, a body scan meditation, which is a great way. Probably what my number one recommendation for really starting
What's
to
a
train.
body scan meditation?
Basically you start at your toes and go to the tip of your head very, very slowly. You can, I have done them with my teacher, Fleet Mall, my mindfulness teacher through the Center for Mindfulness and Public Safety is how I got connected to him. He's done them before that are 40 minutes. I mean, 40 minutes of time just spent like really deep inside of your, really with the kind of building that really deep sense of awareness.
Cool.
When I teach them at the law enforcement academy, I get about 15 or 20 minutes, so it's about half that time, but it's a lot of time. I mean, especially with cadets prone on the floor, and people always notice things that they've never noticed before. I love, and it's important to not just when you're providing these, or an important factor as a teacher. And again, we're on the ILEETA podcast, so as a teacher, it's important not just to provide the exercise, but also to ask questions about it and to hear about people's experiences. And when one person can share an experience that they had, like, I've never felt my feet inside of my shoes before. Like I've never noticed the bottom of my foot before. And, so people, something that we've been walking around with their whole life will be a new sensation. And they say that and someone else goes, man, me too. So it's great to be able to ask those conversations and for a lot of people to recognize that this is something new. But at the last time I did it, someone asked me at the end, they said, can we pay you to come in and do that over the loudspeaker every night? And I said, you don't have to pay me. There are countless body scan meditations that are available for free on YouTube, on my favorite meditation app, which is Insight Timer. And so there are 5-minute body scans. Even when I'm teaching yoga to the general public, like I'll do, a quick scan through the body to kind of like look for stress or any places we're holding tension to release it. So 5 minutes, 20 minutes, free. There's really almost no barrier to beginning this practice. If you type it in, the top results are going to be good ones, or else they wouldn't be at the top because there are so many.
There are a lot. And, I'm glad. Thank you very much for kind of clarifying that, because I think body scan and progressive relaxation, I mean, there are some really good ones out there that if taught well, and like you said, top search results typically yield good results. And even if it's not that good, the reality is it's just a bad voice, bad timing, bad pacing, whatever. They're not giving you bad advice. It's, just one you're not going to resonate with. And so there is, at this point, I want to start kind of operationalizing this, because you already are to some extent. There's a cultural component to any of this material. And so how do I, if I'm someone either in an administrative role, agency administration, not directly connected to wellness or training, I'm just a boss and a good one. Or I'm a training person who is not a wellness coordinator, wellness director, or I'm a wellness director. How do I start operationalizing the things you're talking about if I'm one of these three stakeholders?
I would say that and culture is right. That I think that most of the issues and concerns that we have around law enforcement wellness end up being matters of culture, which means there's not kind of this magic solution we can just drop in and drop out, but that culture is something that's really formed over a long period of time. I think probably one of the easiest ways to get discouraged is to not give it enough time, because the stuff does take time, especially if you're going from a pretty toxic culture, even unintentionally, to trying to create one that is a little bit more open. So really, I think that there's a couple things. There's formal training, like International Critical Incident Stress Foundations, assisting individuals in crisis training. And then there's the Power and Peers from the Fraternal Order of Police. And there are more trainings that are becoming available. But so much of, I think, this culture or some of the kind of cultural problems are it's sometimes related to stigma, and I just don't ever really buy it. And because when people talk about stigma, or like, oh, we don't have this ability to communicate with each other, and it just sort of blows my mind, because it's like, if you have members on like a high risk team who aren't able to ask each other how they're doing, like that's just a lack of even basic trust. I mean, like how can you work together to do these kinds of dangerous missions and objectives without being able to sort of emotionally be able to recognize when someone's having a bad day, or to be able to recognize again that all of these things that happen may impact all of us on different levels. And so it's a matter of trust. So if you have a team like that, being able to start small, being able to start, to be able to start in your area, because I think that for people to really understand what, trust and kind of those good relations should be like, you have to feel it. And you have to know that you're in that sort of, it's like what you said, it takes an example and practice. So there's this sort of formal relationship building, this formal trust building through peer support and other means like that. And, it's interesting to me too, because when people, sort of write off stigma as if like, oh, there's just no way you're going to get cops, to trust each other. We don't talk about our feelings. I'm just, or like men don't want to talk about their feelings. It's like, read a history book. I mean, I'm obsessed with Abraham Lincoln right now. The letters that he wrote to his friends. I mean, we're talking in a relatively short period of time that are, that this ability to kind of communicate openly with friends about what's going on in our lives has really changed and shifted. And so,
I mean, some of the most famous Stoics are some of the most emotionally literate people in history. And yet somehow modern day warriors are skeptical of this. I think it's incredibly toxic that we will get in a stack with people who are armed and ready to go through a door and in whatever order we're in, and just trust that everything's going to go okay. And the reality is, some of the conversations that are had in confidence in those tight-knit groups, that is the center pole of trust, right? Like we see it, but yet somehow when how are you doing okay, the only acceptable answer is fine. Come on, we can do better than that. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's chicken shit. Honestly, it is a lack of courage to be able to have these conversations in this space. And I think this is where courage and trust kind of hit this intersection. If you want to be courageous enough to go through a door, be courageous enough to talk about the feelings associated with it. Sorry.
Yeah, totally. And calling it for what it is, and being able to, I was teaching a new group the other day, and at the end of it, it was a pretty brief session. Yeah, I mean, I could talk for 5 days. So like if I get 45 minutes, it's I'm like,
I get it.
Yeah, I'm packing it in. But someone was like, at the end though, I was just like, there is no excuse for treating somebody like there's something weird, like may the person who has never suffered from any incident before be the first person to judge. We have all been there, every person on that team. And so, I think it's just kind of a matter of calling it out a lot of the time. And, unfortunately, I think that there are just, I have, I think, probably a pretty generous, perspective based on trauma, where when people are just kind of nasty, I'm just like, I am sorry for what happened to you, whatever that was, that that's kind of shut you down in this way. But I think one of the other areas where people get frustrated, one is kind of not letting it have enough time to be able to grow, and the other is just not, let's see, I'm trying to think of the right way to put this. To be able to, it just takes a certain amount of, training and time and effort and, experience, and people just have to kind of see it work right. And and I think the thing that surprises, while it does take some time, sometimes it doesn't take that long when we're talking about culture change. But I think that, starting with the people right around you, and, if you, and this can be hard because even, for me, I have a lot of really amazing contacts like across the state and across the country. But, sometimes especially when you're a supporter, like finding someone to kind of offer the same amount of support can be challenging sometimes. And so, it can feel hard to sort of like kind of pour out when you need that. But it's just, people are suffering, people need support, and change agents, are the ones who are going to, pretty much grab someone by the shoulders and be like, it's okay. Like whatever, I've been there. I think leading with vulnerability is a really important place too, because if someone's going, oh, how are you doing? You okay? I always make fun of it. You okay? And there's no answer to that question other than, yeah, I'm fine. But, if you change the way you approach the topic, saying like, hey, I had a really bad incident like that last year. It really messed with me. Like, I'm here for you. So like leading the way with vulnerability, and just stop acting like this is all happening for the first time, or that it's particularly unique when this individual. And telling people that and reminding them. And I told the people in that small room, I was just like, everybody in this room is now hearing me say that this is very normal, and any of these reactions is normal, and there's just no really other choice other than supporting each other better.
We could probably talk about that one part of it all day long. The just that the leader's role in conducting the debrief and how that can be done empathetically and smartly to elicit those responses and connection. But oftentimes you're absolutely right. It is the gruff, you good, right? Like, I get it. Sometimes that works with the right eye contact, the right pause at the end of it. Can it work? Yes, I've used it. I've had it used on me. It does work and work well. But at the same time, you're right. That co-regulating the authentic disclosure as part of it. I mean, that in itself is like a whole conversation worth having. So I'm not going to pull the thread too hard on it, but I think we can both agree that practicing that before it matters in the low stakes environments is the right thing to do.
Yeah. And it's just a matter of normalization. And talk about another topic. I mean, sleep is another one, and it has a huge impact here too. But, I like most of law enforcement personnel start their careers on night shift and yet are given almost zero support on how to adjust their schedules and their sleep schedules. And then, 10 years down the road and there's burnout. They've got 3 new kids and there's burnout. We're going, how come you're not well? Like, why is there a wellness problem? And so, that's another area too, where it's all of this stuff. I mean, just stop not pretending, not making people figure it out for the first time, but just kind of being more open. And like what you said about the Stoics, my favorite, I have a quote at the top of my LinkedIn page that's from Epictetus. And it says, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. And so I had somebody once in a class ask, they're like, well, all these kids these days, they don't ever want to take anything. They were a little bit of an older student. They don't ever want to do this or do that. And, how do you convince them to, do all this wellness stuff? And I was just like, people are going to want to be like people they admire. And so the best thing you can do is be a person that someone else is going to admire, take care of yourself, take care of other people, be kind to people, engage in activities, show this full spectrum of humanity, but there's no magic switches. There's just kind of co-regulation, like you said, and being the person, who we need and who we want to be, and not waiting for someone else to go and make the situation all perfect to start.
I like what you said there too about, I don't believe in this space, for as long as I've been in it, and it's been a lifetime, that there's ever a perfect time for damn near anything, right? The right time is right now. Do the best you can with what you have. The Teddy Roosevelt thing there. Do the best you can with what you have right now. And from there, adjust. It's rapid experimentation in this space. And if it doesn't work, try something else. But the reality is we can't ignore it. It's got to get better in one way or another. So you're doing some great things in Marion County, just kind of following along with your process there, and your authentic disclosure. Speaking of that, perfect embodiment of it to a not over exposing, right? But a true sense of, okay, she's willing to show a little bit of her struggle. I can relate to this. And so kudos to you for being courageous enough to do that. And I hope you're inspiring others as well. What's working though? So as we look at this whole wellness space, and I was just reading something from WellHub the other day, and having a master's in corporate wellness, like there is so much BS out there that is like all kinds of just try this, and here's a great way to make money doing it. What's working in real life? What should we be doing? What buzzes have you seen? Trends maybe to stay away from. I don't know if you want to go there or not, but I certainly invite you to. What are you seeing?
Well, I mean, my best recommendations is always to be building internal capacity. And so, again, if the problem is culture and you're focusing on, some kind of parachuting in and out, solution, it's not going to fix the culture. Things that help culture is peer support, is the relationships with people. So peer support, whether it's through Power and Peers, ICISF, whatever, essentially that's foundational. How people treat each other, that's what matters every day. When someone shows up on the clock, when they go home, what makes our days good or bad, really ends up being other people. So if those are those relationships is some of the best places to start. And then so it's building that internal culture, and then also focusing on building internal capacity. So when there's a limited budget, to be able to spend that money on things that like train the trainers, and in a perfect world, to me, in my perfect wellness program, I would have a person that was trained to do PT, or not just PT, but who is trained in exercise science, has some sort of certification that they can offer these classes to people, and that there's someone else, and we sent them off and they got training in a nutrition program and they're able to offer nutrition. You've got your peer support person, and then ideally, where I think that most people are in wellness programs, and it's interesting. It's almost like there's a cycle kind of going on right now. If there's programs that are old, some of them are bigger. Some of those bigger ones are kind of hard to sustain. Then there's kind of these, there's very few real shiny kind of new, perfectly working ones, in my opinion. Like everybody's kind of constantly in this cycle of trying to, either start or maintain or restart a program. My best advice for anybody who's doing this is just not to do it alone. And it really echoes the same advice that, we're talking about culturally. So if you are looking at starting a program and you can reach out to find somebody else who's doing a program, stop reinventing the wheel. That's another thing that we've just been saying, that I've been saying over and over. There's way too much of that going on. And if we reach out, and maybe it takes that vulnerability, oh no, I've got to reach out to a stranger and ask them about wellness, and sometimes it's inherited because those people, that person may not be very nice or friendly, but then you just have to kind of keep going. Like what you said, like if the first one doesn't work, go on to the next one. So don't do it alone. Build these programs in relationship to other agencies, especially for peer support, especially for critical incident stress response, so that you have friends at other agencies that can support you and you can support them and you can be there. Building that broad network is really important. And when we have a local wellness summit here, and one of the things that I love about it is that we've got someone who's great with nutrition from one agency and physical fitness in the other, and financial wellness in another, and being able to bring these people together. So I'd really like to see a more regional approach where even if each agency isn't able to train the trainers internally for all of these different aspects of wellness, that we're able to work a little bit better together from a regional sense, to be able to use resources of one person who's kind of become an expert in this area of wellness, and support the other agencies around us.
I love it. And just to kind of summarize that, I heard you with two key points there. There was another one I'm going to ask you about, but number one, develop the network of supporting agencies. And when you first said it, I really appreciated those who are ready for critical incident debriefs, who can come in and support during times when your agency has been, hitting the knees and really needs the help. That's big. The other one that you talked about was the comprehensive approach to fitness. And, you mentioned the personal trainers, athletic trainers. Lots of agencies have these already in-house. Leverage those if you can't get one yourself. Although I can tell you, to get one of your officers certified as a certified personal trainer through any of the big names is a small investment for the role you get, what you get in return. And then, oh, by the way, for them to maintain that, they also can get certified as a nutrition specialist and that kind of stuff. So that, and you mentioned on the spiritual end of it, work with your chaplains. I think you mentioned that early on. develop the network there, because you cannot be all things to all people. And the more of a network you have, the more you can rely on that. What advice would you
then we become culture, right? Like it's that network, it's that constant, like culture doesn't exist, it doesn't end, in a profession at jurisdictional borders. So it's that growing network and that growing, it's okay, these people are doing it, it's okay, these people are doing it, that it kind of makes it okay within our agencies,
right? Or let them experiment over there, but I'm going to watch from a distance.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and okay, that is working. Let me go learn from them and see how that works. I think it's great. And they'll do the same to you. Katie's over there experimenting with this thing. I'm not going to try it just yet. I'm going to watch how it goes for her. So what advice would you give to the agency administrators, chiefs out there who want to support a program like this, are trying to do the right things? What would you say?
Man, I mean, it really is a matter of finding the right people. But that's not always going to be an external thing. And I think that's hard because people they're worried about numbers. They're worried about taking people off of the streets, but being able to find someone who's really passionate about this. I work with a lot of different agencies, like large and small, and there are people who are really amazing that kind of come from within. So, I'm not saying like no outsiders, especially we do need outside support that's vetted, people who can, really kind of get along and enhance programs. But to find like our peer support team in the way that we sort of developed it and found, some of my favorite people, I obviously don't play favorites on my team, but some of the people who I've just loved to watch develop into this role were like some of the last people that I, thought would do it, and they're so good at it. And so, you also got to let people surprise you, just because there's the guy who, loves going to the gym all the time doesn't mean that he is going to be the best peer support person. And so, just finding those people and pulling a lot of people together. And I know it can be hard for people to get that one person, but it really is a group. It kind of the more people that can get involved from more areas that are already existing within the agency, the more kind of natural trust that I think that there will be.
So speed round, 3 quick questions for you. A practice you use regularly?
Meditation and mindfulness. It's completely changed my the way I think about myself and how I'm able to get stuff done.
Awesome. Something you're curious about right now that you are exploring?
Always more curious about sleep and just how to get better sleep and how to help other people with it.
Awesome. And the last question that I typically ask everybody is a trainer tip, something to be more successful as an instructor.
This is kind of dual purpose. So being quiet, some of I hear people ask questions to classes and then, get uncomfortable in the silence and not give people that, let students get uncomfortable in the silence and fill the silence with responses. But it's a kind of dual purpose response, because getting quiet also can help pull that sort of information out of someone who you might want to help. So we can get uncomfortable. We can ask them, how are you doing? And, if they're not like, immediately telling you the problems, and okay, fine, and move on. So yeah, just getting comfortable with silence.
Love it. Awesome. Katie, thank you so much for your time today. I know you are busy. You're doing a lot of great things. And so I'm looking forward to keeping up with you on this, but also if you're interested in learning more about Katie, follow her on LinkedIn, look her up, Katie Carlson. But also you have a blog that you use.
Yeah, it's pretty random. LinkedIn is where most law enforcement people will find the most relevant writing.
Perfect. Okay. And then any last words to the audience?
I'm just so grateful to be here. And, we just all have to take such good care of each other. So anyone who's doing that, I have gratitude for in their agency. It's not easy, but we can get there.
So what'd you think of that interview? I mean, like I said, hands down, somebody who is truly passionate about the work she's doing and has a very large agency to work with, relatively large, of course. The reality is that wherever you are, whatever you're doing in this profession, you are a change agent for wellness if you care enough to do it. If you are the chief, she had some great insight in there on how to empower your folks, your training individuals, your wellness staff, that sort of stuff. If you don't have that, some ways to get after it. If you are the training officer and you don't have a wellness coordinator, gave some good advice on how to get after that. And then ultimately, if you're that wellness director, if you are the coordinator in your department who is responsible for wellness, and at this point, I can't imagine too many agencies out there who don't have that. So get this to whoever that person is, because there was a lot of great information in there. Can't encourage highly enough. Connect with Katie and the other folks at ILEETA who are other ILEETA members who are passionate about this topic and all topics. That's one of the things I love about ILEETA is today I'm going to have a conversation with a wellness director, but next week it is with a training specialist, somebody who is deeply committed to understanding adult learning. Cannot wait for that one. So I love doing these interviews, and I hope that comes through and you're seeing it wherever you are, because these are individuals who are truly passionate about our profession. And ILEETA exists to inspire excellence in law enforcement training. I'm going to say that one more time so I hopefully can say it correctly. ILEETA exists to inspire excellence in law enforcement training. Thank you for being a part of that.